Everyone says, I want that next level, but they don't understand energy is the requirement to get there. And when we measured energy in our studies, we were talking about really mental energy, emotional energy, and physical energy. And it was a huge turning point in my life when I started realizing these things, because, that whole thing that we as entrepreneurs, we want to wait for maybe one day I'll feel energized, or maybe one day I'll feel joy, or maybe one day I can have fun after, all the money's in the bank, and you got the house or the cars or the money or the stuff, and then people go, then I'm going to be really a fun person. It's like, no, if you're not a fun person when you're broke, you're not going to be that much more fun when you're rich. And I think that people have to learn to bring the joy. It's one of our little taglines on our shirts, right? Bring the joy. And that says, you don't have joy, just like I don't think people have happiness. I don't think people have sadness either. I think that we are generating the emotions and the feelings that we experience in life. And as soon as we own that responsibility, life gets really fun, because now we can choose it. And I'll give you an example. Last night, I spoke to 12,000 people on stage here in LA at the convention center. And it was terrifying because Pitbull was opening. I'm backstage and I feel the cortisol dropping. I feel myself getting tense. Pitbull talks for me like 10 minutes and then he does a 4-song set.
Whoa.
Okay. When he finishes 4-song set, I got to come and hit the stage and do 90 minutes. And I'm backstage, and the emotion of my life at that moment is terror, is stress, because do they have my video? They don't have the video, the keynote's not working, all this other stuff is going on. I mean, it was just like really intense. But when I hit that stage, I'm responsible for my emotion and my feelings. Feelings come up to people. So of course I have anxiety in that moment. I'm kind of freaked out. I have to, in that moment, determine the feeling that I'm after. And we talk about that in the book, is that we have to determine the feeling that we are after and live into that feeling, not hope it lands on us. And that's when someone starts getting real mastery in life. Because I knew I had hit that stage and there couldn't be the stress on me. There couldn't be the anxiety on me. I had to bring joy at a stage at level, 10x.
Walk us through the mechanisms of that. So, and it's something that you cover very well in the book, is there's a process. In fact, the book is high-performing habits, right? And you really go into the habits, the mechanisms, the things that you can do, say, orchestrate into your life, which I think is really the core of what makes the book so powerful. So in that moment, you're backstage. What are you actually doing?
Yeah. First, I'm closing my eyes and say, where is this emotion coming from? And I realize in my mind, it's like, oh, it's because I'm thinking I have to go follow Pitbull. And that's where people fail in life. Oh, well, my Instagram's not like hers, or, I'm not as famous as him. We have all these comparisons that cause us cortisol or anxiety, that shut us down, and then we stop performing our best because we're trying to follow somebody versus just go do our thing. So I identified that's where I'm at. Okay, what's that causing? That's causing that cortisol adrenal drip that I don't want right now. So what do I need to do? And the fastest ways to get yourself back is usually, breath and movement. So I teach this program, High Performance Academy. It's like one of the crowd favorites. On day 3, we have 2,000 people there, and about 40% of the audience is international. So day 3, their jet lag is just whooping them, right? And it's predictable. I know exactly about 1 in the afternoon, day 3, they start bonking. So I do this breath scaling thing where I teach them to breathe in through their nose, like they're breathing in the ocean, like, and then breathe out, okay? And that's kind of the top level. So we just start breathing normal, and it gets more and more and more and more and more and more intense until you're at the top, and it's literally like, and I sustain that for like 60 seconds. And what it is, it's like a hit of like oxygen, like cocaine to the brain for oxygen. And what
Do you
it
start
also
getting
has,
lightheaded or anything?
No, because I've done it so much, right? I don't push myself to get lightheaded. I push myself to fully oxygenate the body. But what you do, as soon as you do that, and the most important thing is, for those who are going to try this at home, you scale up to it, then you scale down to find your regular breath again. And you need to not be standing there with your knees locked. And if you ever feel dizzy, sit down. But I do that, and all of a sudden you feel an incredible amount of energy in your body. Your mind just goes super sharp. And the added benefit of that much oxygen intake lowers cortisol.
That's interesting.
Right? We know from meditative practices, when we deep breathe, we tend to lower cortisol or lower that sense of anxiety, even if we don't get the full mechanism of the hormone release. Then all of a sudden it's like, I'm in my zone, I'm ready to go. Then I do full body Qigong, which is like a Qigong. A cupping activity in Qigong is basically like you're padding up 1 inch at a time on different parts of your body like this, all over. So you do your arms, your legs, your back. And what that's doing is opening the meridians in your body. And now my mind's open, my body's fully ready to serve, and now it's like, let's get it. I'm excited, because now it's just like, I identified the source of the anxiety, got rid of it, took care of the mechanism in the body that was also making me feel like crap, and then it's exciting. I mean, people see me on this big stage and they think, or they see you and they think, well, he must always be in the perfect state or the perfect energy, and he's always going to be great, and that's not true. You know, great athletes, great performers, an executive walk into an important meeting, you got to go deal with your kid who's struggling with math. When we walk into those situations, we have to set intention for what we want to do in that situation, and we have to release tension. And so the practices in high performance habits, that was the second big finding that we had, was high performers are generating the energy, and that means the mental, emotional, physical energy that they feel is necessary to serve with excellence in a certain situation. Like, they're so conscious of it. And I know that's common sense for people, but it's not always common practice.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a lot of people just wander into that situation, and I'm the guy who says, you know what, get more intentional, release the tension you have, walk in as your highest self, because that's something you'll never regret. What we found, so in high performance habits, what we did, like you mentioned, we did the world's largest study of high performers, data from over 190 countries, from what essentially turns out to be like people who are in that top 15% of whatever they do. And we found that there was basically personal habits and social habits. And the personal habits was, you know, like seek clarity, generate energy. And that third one was raise necessity, which was something I didn't even know really was a thing psychologically, as important as it turned out to be. And necessity is kind of short for performance necessity, or what we call psychological necessity, which means there is a moment in which you are serving people, or you're trying to achieve your goal or your dream, in which now it is not a preference, it's a must, right? But to use better languaging, it becomes necessary for us to excel in this. Like, it's not a hope anymore. It's not, it should do it. It becomes so necessary that it connects with our identity, that we feel it is necessary for me to deliver with excellence here because that is who I am. It's necessary for me to deliver with excellence here because somebody needs me to do well. It's necessary for me to do well here because this topic, this thing I'm doing, I'm passionate about this, I care about this, I want to master this. I'm obsessed with this. And it's necessary for me to do well because of the time. It's a deadline, or it's go time. And when all those come together, that personal side of this is my identity and I'm obsessed about it, and that other side where it's like somebody needs me and there is a real deadline, right in the middle, that's performance necessity. And when we hit that, game changer. Game changer. But it is uncomfortable because people don't want to exude that much passion in which it becomes obsession because they're fearful of their obsessions. Well, if I'm obsessed about this topic, it's going to take away from my family, from my time. It's going to introduce a lot of, fear or unknowns to me. So they back off. But I tell people all the time, there is a difference between passion and obsession. And high performers have obsession about the topic, right? They are obsessed about the topic in which they're trying to learn, master, grow into. And so that obsession is real. And I tell people the difference, here's how you know the difference between the two. When you're passionate, everybody cheers you on. They're stoked for you. Oh, you found your passion? Awesome. Follow your passion. Live with passion. Be passionate. Chase your passions. Everything, like passion. Passion's good. Like, the world's gonna be like, yay, passion, right? When you're obsessed, they're like, why you gotta be so crazy? Why can't you be satisfied? Why do you always gotta get things so perfect? Why you spend so much time here? When you're obsessed, people think you're nuts. So it's different. And it's like, I always tell people, if no one thinks you're crazy, you're not yet operating to the outer limits of your potential. You're not there yet. Because somebody in your life should say, man, you really care about this in like a crazy way. And when you get there, you know you found your thing. And not everybody finds that. I think that's also why it's scary. Some people go, well, I'm passionate or I'm happy, but I don't really obsess about anything. You know, most people obsess about, you know, their shows on Netflix more than their life. I know people who obsess more about their you know, thread count in their sheets at their house than they do about the impact they're making in the world.
Why do you think people can slip into an obsession over Netflix or whatever, or thread count, but they don't do that for something that could really change their life?
Feedback.
That's interesting. It's not what I expected you to say. What do you mean by that?
Because, you know, buying something or getting pulled into Netflix, being obsessed about something that gives you no feedback is not scary. A real obsession, like trying to make an impact in the world, you're gonna get feedback. You try to make a difference in somebody's life, they're gonna tell you, that doesn't resonate with me, Brendan. You try to make a difference in a nonprofit, you try to change the world, you try to start something like this, and the views come or they don't come, there's feedback. And people are terrified. It's one of the 4 central fears we all have is rejection. We're terrified, like to be rejected. And think about, if you really want to make an impact, you're going to get a lot of judgment, you're going to get a lot of hate, and ultimately you're going to get rejection. People are going to like just diss on you. People are going to say that's not good enough. People are going to say, who do you think you are? And people are so worried about that they stop. And so it's easier. Things that don't give you feedback. Watching Netflix don't give you no feedback. It's easy. There's no disappointment there. Even if you don't like the show, what do? You just go on to the next show. There's no disappointment there. You know, I think trying to make an impact, there's a lot of disappointment and fear and potential for rejection. So people don't get obsessed about making a difference and making an impact because it can hurt. When I started my career, and I really decided to go all in with writing and online training. This is like 2006. I'd gone broke, completely bankrupt, and failed. I left my corporate job. I had this cushy kind of corporate job as a consultant. Good job. Left it to write. And I didn't know how to make it as a writer. I wanted to do seminars and workshops, didn't know how to do that. So I was pretty much a hot mess, ran out of money. I got nothing to my name, nothing, kind of no positive prospects. No one's calling me except the guys who want the money. And one night I'm writing, and the apartment was so small. On the bed, I had all, you know, my bills, my vision boards, all my research, all my journals. Like the bed was basically the desk, the extended desk. And my lady comes in, Denise, and she walks past me, but she sees I'm like trying to write. So she doesn't want to disturb me. She crawls under the covers of the bed, and I'm just typing, kind of casually typing away. And I look over, and I see my woman sleeping under my bills. Wow. And it was just like, you know, because none of us want to see our, you know, our family suffer because we are not performing.
Sure.
And I was just like, I gotta figure this out. And I'm telling you, I wrote more that night than any night in my entire life. Next day I wrote more than ever. That birthed Life's Golden Ticket, which became a bestseller. And in 18 months later, because I was like, I'm gonna figure out this online thing, I'm gonna figure out marketing, I'm gonna figure out how to teach, I'm gonna figure out how to train and get paid for it, because I'd never really been paid for those things. I said, I'm gonna figure out this industry, and I'm gonna make it. 18 months later, after her crawling under the bills, I made $4.6 million
Jesus.
Online. Total transformation. People are like, how did you do it? I'm like, she was my necessity. I was not going to let my woman be in that situation. And she believed in me, she supported me, she married me. And, but she was my drive. And the second part was I went all in with my identity. I said, I am going to be a great writer, and I am going to be one of the greatest online trainers there ever was. Strengths are not highly correlated with long-term success, right? There's not a lot of data and there is not a lot of research that has shown it leads to long-term success with the positive outcomes associated with what we care about in psychology, which is we care about happiness, we care about health, and we care about your positive relationships. And this myth that, oh, we'll just follow our strengths to, to the promised land is just not true when you actually talk with high performers. Because one of my favorite questions, and if anyone's down this, just go up to anyone who's good and say, were you always good at that? And they'll be like, no. They'll be like, not at all. Like, well, did you always have an inclination to do every element of what you're doing really well? No. Like me, man, I sucked on stage. This year I've talked to 60,000 people live. This is really important because this idea that our strengths are going to give us everything, it's just not true. I sucked speaking on stage. Matter of fact, I was terrified of it. Terrified. But one reason I love your show is because I had that intention of, I want to make an impact. And when someone actually asks and kind of owns that, like when they say, do I want to make an impact? And the answer is yes, and they own it. They realize they're going to have to develop. They can no longer leave their growth to randomness, because if they do, they'll always be mediocre. And they realize, I got to become something entirely above both of those. That's what most people don't see. They're like, we made this binary false conversation, right? It's not a true sort of choice here. It's a false dichotomy, we call it, right? It's not strengths or weaknesses. Many of you, if you have a big dream, a huge goal, you got to become something entirely above and beyond any strengths you even know about, feel, or own, and go way beyond any weaknesses you've ever even addressed or even you know about, because you're going to discover so many new strengths and so many new weaknesses on the path that it's almost irrelevant what they are now. It's what's the goal and build into that. I didn't know how to write. I get a lot of critics who are like literary guys about my books because every book is different, right? 6 books, all of them different. And the reason they all read differently is I am challenging myself as a writer to develop, to get better. Every book I write, I'm going to write this like nothing I've ever written before. And I go to work at building a new skill set to be able to write. Like Manifesto, I researched for 2.5 years just how to write it.
Wow.
Not what to write, how. How do I get that pentameter? What was the rhythm in which revolutionist rhetoric was spoken in or written in? Just to understand that took me 2.5 years. So I had no conceptual understanding of it. It wasn't a strength. It wasn't on my radar. When you get that life is really short and you felt that before, either by you were threatened or you've had someone near and dear die, but when you have that real essence in you that says life is short, have reverence for it, live it, that's a really big thing. I got that at 19, and I learned specifically that if we have a moment of cognition before the end of our life, we tend to ask questions to evaluate if we're happy. So if I have any impact in the world, it's going to come from that experience where I learned that the ultimate lesson is determine what the questions you're going to ask at the end of your life are going to be. Find out those questions. What will you ask at the end of your life to evaluate your life so that you would know if you were happy with your life? Like, figure out those questions and then live each day intentionally so you're happy with the answers at the end. For me, the questions I had were, did I live? Which I hadn't. I hadn't been living my life. I'd been thinking about taking my life. Right. Did I love? No, my heart was broken. And I put up all these walls to keep out other people. And I always say, sometimes the walls we put up to keep out the bad guys prevent the good guys from getting in. And suddenly in our own self-protection, we block out the very thing we want, which is connection. And I learned that I would ask, did I matter? 22 years ago, on a dark Caribbean night, I'm standing on the crumpled hood of a car, bleeding out. My friend and I just wrecked a car. He's screaming at the top of his lungs. He's bleeding. We don't know if we're going to live. And I'm standing on the hood of this car, looking down at all this blood, and I'm in terror. And I just remember looking down at the hood and just thinking, did I even matter? And I hated the answer at that time in my life. Because I'm a 19-year-old kid. I didn't know about impact theory. For real. I didn't know to think about that. Young kids sometimes, they don't know to think about that. I didn't know to think about legacy, meaning. Did I matter? I didn't think I did. But the good news is, I'm a good learner. And I felt like I got a second chance from God that night. And I learned that it was really important for me to figure out, how do I live and how do I love and how do I matter in such a way that if I face my death again, I'll know I've earned the second chance. And so what I want to tell people, and the impact I want, is I just want people to know your questions, man. Live intentionally and earn the life that you've been given, because this moment's a blessing. So earn this moment and live intentionally.